What's good, fam? It's Lil Vibe here at Web3 Studios, diving right back into part two of this Soliloquies and OKC story, where I'm diving in and breaking down my latest album with Axel, OKC. And if you haven't seen part one, definitely check that out. It's on YouTube and also on our Spotify podcast. So, depending on if you like to watch, if you like to listen, it's out there. I will say, if you're watching, you get the benefit of seeing the reference materials and things that we're talking about. So, if you are just listening to that podcast, you may not catch everything, and there may be some moments where it looks like I'm looking at something because I am looking at something. But either way, I mentioned the materials and that we can dig it back up later. Definitely tap into the visual version as well, all right? Get both worlds. And make sure you listen to that album as well. If you haven't, we're going to be going through each song on the album. So dive into the album, check it out. Okay, it's out there now, literally everywhere. So once again, whatever you like to stream music on, it's out there. And if you're into collecting digitally, it's out there as well. So we dug into all that on part one. You can check out the link in the bio wherever this is at, and probably in the description as well, to get to all of that fun stuff. Okay, so with that, let's just dive more into the album, and I want to dive into one of my favorite parts, and part that I know is front and center. It's gonna come up, and we didn't touch on it in the first part. So it's the artwork, the imagery, the cover art, and everything like that. And also gonna dive into some of the reference materials as we go into that as well. So what we have here for the cover art, right? We have, you can see there's myself there as a kid, and I've got on the Bulls jacket, right? So if you listen to old school track number 3, Bulls jacket on the bus stop, kid. Now I'm about to buy the lot by the bus stop, kid. Hey, right? Talking about that old school shit. That's the Bulls jacket. And this is in Italy. So 1997, I took a trip to Italy with my mom, and that side of the family is over there. So shout out to the fam. And we were just going around to all these different sites and all these different places. And this particular place is in a place called Split Mountain, and it's from where my mom's hometown is. And so this is a very interesting place, and this is one place where we took this picture. And so throughout the album as well, remember, I was dropping these as singles, right? We're doing these a lot of singles, so each one had its own artwork. So if you go out there and look back through the individual singles, and we'll do that here in a minute, you can see there's artwork at different sites, right? So for this particular one, for the album artwork, I decided to go with this for several reasons. Ultimately, it called out to me. But then as I started to look more into this site, and obviously all of the inspirations and influences for this album and just everything about my life, a very interesting site, Split Mountain. So supposedly, right, the lore around this mountain is that upon Christ's crucifixion, God was angered. He sent a lightning bolt, an earthquake, to this mountain, and it made 3 cracks, 3 splits in the mountain. And so there's a sanctuary up here, and in the 11th century, Benedictine monks built this sanctuary, Sanctuary Santissima Trinita or something like that. Look it up, by the way, once again on my X profile, previously known as Twitter. I've got just links and threads to where you can look all this information up as well. And so yeah, they built this sanctuary here, and anyway, so the number 3 and a lightning bolt, right? That's interesting. That's the main thing I want to impress here, as well as it's got a nice picture of the sea. There's sand here, and some trees and a visage up there, right? So just a nice, interesting. I feel like all the elements are encapsulated, right? The red with the red on the jacket with the fire as well. So playing with the elements as well. Fire, the air, of course, water, earth, and everything. There's a line in Drive, feeling like I'm Avatar, Aang, really witty. Yeah, it's really litty, right? So playing with the elements once again, and alchemical themes and nature and tarot. So that's once again how this cover image formed, and why I chose this particular one out of all the images. So back to this site, right, and the number 3 and 11. So once again, as I mentioned, I was born on the 11th. Okay, so there was a tie in there for me. It's something that called to my intuition to say, okay, this would probably be good cover image. And also 11 tracks on the album once again. And for the number 3, remember my tarot life path number is a 3. Okay, or my personality and destiny cards, however you want to call them, is a 3, which is the Empress. All right, and so that all factored into this album cover, but also the synchronicities and just interesting things about this. So me being born in September, right, the 9th month, that's in astrology, that's the archetype of Virgo, right? Or the Virgin Mother of the Earth archetype. So once again, Empress tying into that. So everything's tying together, and let's dive into this a bit more, okay? And there's an interesting thing here, and about the Sanctuary Santissima Trinita, right? Gosh, a mouthful. Might have got that right or wrong, but who cares? Right, so remember, 11th century Benedictine monks built this, okay? 11 songs of the album, 11 the day I was born. And let's look at something else here. So remember, as I mentioned, we were dropping these as singles, okay? So one of these singles, particularly Poolside Drive, let's see if I can find it here. Wow. So you see on this cover art, Poolside Drive, once again, Bulls jacket. All right. I love being able, I can see this in here. That's dope. Bulls jacket, right? And I got my hand, I'm throwing something into a fountain here. Okay. This fountain is the Fountain Trevi in Rome, and pretty storied fountain. Okay. And we'll go into that as well. Supposedly, you throw a coin in this fountain, and you're destined to return to Rome one day. So, hey, let's go. But anyway, so that's there. Why am I bringing that up? Let's go back here. Now I just want to get the album cover image back up there. Wow. Look at that. Okay. So let's go look at that. Fountain Trevi. Here it is. Right? You can go look it up in all its majesty. Really a beautiful fountain. And actually this year, interestingly enough, another synchronicity, climate protesters actually put charcoal in the fountain. And, we have a line in South. This is track number 9 on the album. This is central to the comedy, like Dante in the Inferno had to fortify the fortress like we live in Livorno. But, Dave Chappelle, Black as Hell. So, Black as Hell, Pay Me Now, Wish Me Well. It was an interesting line. Didn't quite get it fully at the time. At least I intended it one way. But when that happened, and it was around the same time as the Fountain Trevi, I connected that. So, that was interesting. But this fountain, so once again, Web3 Studios, right? Web3, this whole new, quote unquote, new digital ownership, technology, experience that we're moving into, or age that we're moving into, where, with Web 1, the popular thing they say, Web 1 was reading information, Web 2 was being able to write and update that information, and now Web 3 is being able to own that information, right? So that's where we're at. So regardless, that's what we named our studio, Web3 Studios, a decentralized studio, because we don't have one central location. We're everywhere, and we're on all the social media platforms that we create and we distribute in a decentralized way. So Web3 Studios. Interesting thing about the Fountain Trevi. Fountain at the junction of 3 roads, Trevia, Web3, right? So another little synchronicity there, okay? It marks the terminal point of the modern Aqua Virgin revived Aqua Virgo. So once again, Virgo, my birth month archetype, and this year also as well is my hermit year. So the hermit is also, lone, solitary, a symbol of just similar to Virgo, right? And one of aqueducts that supplied water to ancient Rome, all right? In 19th century BC. So, it goes into more history there. You can find that. And then diving in more to the Aqua Virgo, okay, get this. It was one of 11 Roman aqueducts that supplied the city of ancient Rome. So once again, we're finding number 11, 3, okay, Virgo, Empress 9 is all in there. So these are just more synchronicities and interesting things that, as I was picking the album art for this, I didn't come to find out some of this stuff till later when I picked the final cover art. But when I'm going through picking the individual arts, it wasn't that apparent, in terms of what was going on. So something I got to piece together after the fact, which was really cool. And that's going to bring us to the first thing I want to dive into here, talking about, wow, man, and his symbols, Carl Jung, mentioned last time, he wrote this with his associates and colleagues and students when he was near his death or transition. And there's a very interesting couple interesting parts in here. Once again, just tying into synchronicities. And so number 11, I'm just gonna show you how my mind works, how this album came together, how my artistic intuition and journey comes together, how my art comes together, my songs and things come together. So I was reading through this, and Jung is talking about something in this part of the book where you can have something buried in your mind, where there's something you've read before and it can crop back up later on, or something completely new can flash into your mind. So let's read this excerpt here and see where we're going. So I myself found a fascinating example of this in Nietzsche's book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, where the author reproduces almost word for word an incident reported in a ship's log for the year 1686. By sheer chance, I had read this seaman's yarn in a book published about 1835, half a century before Nietzsche wrote, and when I found the similar passage in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, I was struck by its peculiar style. Wow, now you got me twanging. Y'all know I'm from Oklahoma. Woo, I got these big words in here, boy. Come on, okay, see that London. All right, which was different from Nietzsche's usual language. I was convinced that Nietzsche must also have seen the old book. Though he made no reference to it, I wrote to his sister, who was still alive, and she confirmed that she and her brother had in fact read the book together when he was 11 years old. I think, from the context, it is inconceivable that Nietzsche had any idea that he was plagiarizing this story. I believe that 50 years later, it had unexpectedly slipped into focus in his conscious mind. So Carl Jung was again one of the foremost psychologists, psychotherapists of the era, whatever you want to call him, a contemporary Freud. They worked together for a while and then fallen out and whatnot. But regardless, he coined the term synchronicity and did a lot of work really in the area with dreams and individuation and the unconscious and the conscious mind. So he's diving into this work here, and he's coming to find some of these interesting causalities and things. So I'm going to jump ahead a bit here. But he says, just as conscious contents can vanish into the unconscious, new contents which have never yet been conscious can arise from it. One may have an inkling, for instance, that something is on the point of breaking into consciousness, that something, quote unquote, is in the air, or that one, quote unquote, smells a rat. The discovery that the unconscious is no mere depository of the past, but is also full of germs of future psychic situations and ideas, led me to my own new approach to psychology. So a great deal of controversial discussion has arisen around this point, but it is a fact that in addition to memories from long-distant conscious past, completely new thoughts and creative ideas can also present themselves from the unconscious. Thoughts and ideas that have never been conscious before, they grow up from the dark depths of the mind like a lotus and form a most important part of the subliminal psyche. We find this in everyday life where dilemmas are sometimes solved by the most surprising new propositions. Many artists, philosophers, and even scientists owe some of their best ideas to inspirations that appear suddenly from the unconscious. The ability to reach a rich vein of such material and to translate it effectively into philosophy, literature, music, or scientific discovery is one of the hallmarks of what is commonly called genius. We can find clear proof of this in the history of science itself. For example, the French mathematician Poincaré, sure I pronounced that in an interesting way, and the chemist Kekulé owed important scientific discoveries, as they themselves admit, to sudden pictorial quote-unquote revelations from the unconscious. The so-called mystical experience of the French philosopher Descartes involved a similar sudden revelation in which he saw a flash in the order of all sciences. Same for the British author Robert Louis Stevenson, who spent years looking for a story that would fit into his quote-unquote strong sense of man's double meaning, when the plot of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was suddenly revealed to him in a dream. Later I shall describe more in detail how this material, and he goes into that more. So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, another thing there. Track 4, Menace. We have bars in there. A literary menace with this pen and this pencil. Couldn't outline it any clearer with a stencil. Reminiscent of that Frankenstein, Dr. Hyde, Mr. Jekyll, something like that. So dive in there as well. But that's another interesting synchronicity. But so Jung speaking about how new things can flash into mind. If you watch part 1, I described the intuition about how to order the tracks, 11 on there, right? And we're going to dive back into Man and His Symbols in a moment. But let's dive into Think and Grow Rich, another great book that one of my mentors recommended to me. And it's been a fantastic book. And of course, one of my good friends as well, the place where we met, same mentor. We got tapped in on this book. So another synchronicity, which will dive more into the story here as we go on. There's an interesting part in this book about synchronicities and unconscious mind and flashing in. And so, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, he studied a lot of quote unquote great leaders, business leaders, men, women, people throughout history who accomplished things. And, he really worked to figure out what was the differentiating factor between them, if any. And he came to ultimately the mind and what you think and believing about yourself. So, the chapter in here, the sixth sense, right? So, the doors to the temple of wisdom, the 13th step to riches. The quote unquote 13th principle is known as the sixth sense. Infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily through the sixth sense without any effort or demands by the individual. This principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering. He has other principles in here. The sixth sense is the portion of the subconscious mind that has been referred to as the creative imagination. It has also been referred to as the receiving set, through which ideas, plans, and thoughts flash into the mind. The flashes, right? So flashes, we got all these flashes, right? So lightning, bow, OKC, bow, OKC. Once again, bow. We got the C there in the background. And thunder, by the way, our basketball team is named Thunder. So lightning, thunder, another interesting synchronicity. We didn't have a team until a few years ago. So another interesting thing, another interesting synchronicity there, right? OKC, thunder. Let's go. Sixth sense defies description. It cannot be described to a person. So, he has some things in here about it. But that's interesting. Another tie-in. And once again, he studied many successful people throughout history, and these were a lot of the principles they've applied. And so, jumping back to Man and His Symbols, now we're going to go to a slight excerpt by M.L. von France, which is one of Jung's associates, students, what have you, compatriots. And by the way, if you're still rocking with me this far, shout out to you. You're a trooper. Once again, I said this is the type of artist I am. This is the type of stuff we dive into, long form content, and this is the type of stuff that goes into the art and the music. And why we release things a certain way, why we price things a certain way. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. So this is what you get when you get a little vibe in the Web3 studios, So let's dive in here to something that ties together synchronicity really well. So we're seeing all these different synchronicities already throughout the album, throughout my life, and how this ties in so far to everything I pick and the decisions I've made, and the album art. And let's dive in even more here, and let's find some more interesting things. I'm going to lead into a story as well that led me to a lot of these materials and ties these materials together. So M.L. von France, when she's talking about Jung and synchronicity, and she's talking about, there's an interesting portion here where she's talking about he or she rather, I say M.L. von France is talking about the Philosopher's Stone and alchemy and the importance of stones. And if you remember the number 11, right, on 11/11/2011, I put out that project, Philosopher's Stone, Stage 1, Negrito. And a lot of the themes end up becoming resurrected in this album, albeit in a better, bigger, more elevated way. Once again, a shout out to Axel, RJC Productions, P Status Beats, my guys, killing the soundscape on this. And so, here's another tie-in to all of that, to alchemy, to all this stuff. Got Full Metal Alchemist bars in there on Gaslit. Nicholas like Flamel at the stove with the gaslets. Nicholas Flamel, the French manuscript, and Philosopher and Alchemist. And just like Roy Mustang, keep the flame in my hand lit with the full metal like it was a state alchemist. Okay, that comes back, throwing back to that time, me really learning, diving into this stuff more. Been learning about this stuff my whole life, but we're diving into it more. Saw that anime, Full Metal Alchemist, and started to go in. So, the urge that we find in practically all civilizations to erect stone monuments to famous men or on the site of important events probably also stems from the symbolic meaning of the stone. The stone that Jacob placed on the spot where he had his famous dream, or certain stones left by simple people on the tombs of local saints or heroes, show the original nature of the human urge to express an otherwise inexpressible experience by the stone symbol. It is no wonder that many religious cults use the stone to signify God or to mark a place of worship. The holiest sanctuary of the Islamic world is the Kaaba, the black stone in Mecca, to which all pious Muslims hope to make their pilgrimage. According to Christian ecclesiastical symbolism, Christ is the stone, quote unquote, the stone that the builders rejected, which became the quote unquote head of the corner. That's from Luke XX17. Alternatively, he is called the quote unquote spiritual rock from which the water of life springs. That's 1 Corinthians X4. Medieval alchemists who searched for the secret of matter in a pre scientific way, hoping to find God in it, or at least the working of divine activity, believed that this secret was embodied in their famous quote unquote philosopher's stone. But some of the alchemists dimly perceived that their much sought after stone was a symbol of something that can be found only within the psyche of man. An old Arabian alchemist, Maurinius, said, quote unquote, this thing, the philosopher's stone, is extracted from you. You are its mineral, and one can find it in you. Or to put it more clearly, they, the alchemists, take it from you. If you recognize this, the love and approbation of the stone will grow within you. Know that this is true without doubt. We get to it, I promise. The alchemical stone, the quote-unquote lapis, symbolizes something that can never be lost or dissolved, something eternal that some alchemists compare to the mystical experience of God within one's own soul. It usually takes prolonged suffering to burn away all the superfluous psychic elements concealing the stone, but some profound inner experience of the self does occur to most people at least once in a lifetime. Okay, see. From the psychological standpoint, a genuinely religious attitude consists of an effort to discover this unique experience and gradually to keep it in tune with it. It is relevant that a stone is itself something permanent, so that the self becomes an inner partner toward whom one's attention is continually turned. The fact that this highest and most frequent symbol of the self is an object of inorganic matter points yet to another field of inquiry and speculation. That is still the unknown relationship between what we call the unconscious psyche and what we call matter, a mystery with which psychosomatic medicine endeavors to grapple. In studying this still undefined and unexplained connection, it may prove to be that the psyche and matter are actually the same phenomenon, one observed from quote unquote within and the other from quote unquote without. Dr. Jung put forward a new concept that he called synchronicity. This term means a quote unquote meaningful coincidence of outer and inner events that are not themselves casually connected. The emphasis lies on the word quote unquote meaningful. Yes, it does. If an aircraft crashes before my eyes and I am blowing my nose, this is a coincidence of events that has no meaning. It is simply a chance occurrence of a kind that happens all the time. But if I bought a blue frock and by mistake the shop delivered a black one on the day of my near relatives died, this would be a meaningful coincidence. The two events are not causally related. So I said casually earlier, it's causally, not causally related, but they are connected by the symbolic meaning that our society gives to the color black. Wherever Dr. Jung observed such meaningful coincidences in an individual's life, it seemed as if the individual's dreams revealed that there was an archetype activated in the unconscious of the individual concerned. To illustrate this by my example of the black frock, in such a case, the person who receives a black frock might also have had a dream on the theme of death. It seems as if the underlying archetype is manifesting itself simultaneously in inner and external events. The common denominator is a symbolically expressed message, in this case, a message about death. As soon as we notice that certain types of event, quote unquote, like to cluster together at certain times, we begin to understand the attitude of the Chinese, whose theories and medicines and philosophy and even building are based on a science of meaningful coincidences. So, this is interesting because it's tying synchronicity to Chinese philosophy. And in part one, we got, we had bars in there from Hagakure and, Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching, right? So there's more tie-ins there. And one can see the same underlying theme in astrology, much the same underlying theme in astrology, right? So the classical Chinese text did not ask what causes what, but rather what likes to occur with what. One can see much the same underlying theme in astrology, and in the same way, various civilizations have depended on consulting oracles and paying attention to omens. All of these are attempts to provide an explanation of coincidence that is different from one that depends on straightforward cause and effect. In creating the concept of synchronicity, Dr. Jung stretched a way in which we might penetrate deeper into the interrelation of psyche and matter, and it's precisely towards such a relation that the symbol of the stone seems to point. But this is still a completely open and insufficiently explored matter with which future generations of psychologists and physicists must deal. Indeed. Okay, see, let's go. It may seem that my discussion of synchronicity has led me away from my main theme, but I feel it is necessary to make at least a brief introductory reference to it because it is a Jungian hypothesis that seems to be pregnant with future possibilities of investigation and application. Synchronistic events, moreover, almost invariably accompany the crucial phases of the process of individuation, but too often they pass unnoticed because the individual has not learned to watch for such coincidences and to make them meaningful in relation to the symbolism of his dreams. Wow, so thank you, ML France, and Young, of course, for those beautiful words, and get my bookmarks back in there so I don't lose that. So, that ties this all together beautifully, and really the work that is being done with this album and the work that I like to do. And, so now let's dive into a little story, okay, with that. So, some more synchronicities tying into this. As I mentioned on, or may not have mentioned, but rather, track 5. Okay, let's make sure we still, this thing's got to still be recorded. Yes, sir, we got too good? Yeah, we good. We rolling, fam. Appreciate y'all still rocking with me. Everybody rolling the album out there. It's get some of the light up in here, boy. Okay, see you out London. So, track 5, Monster. I have a line in there, the third verse, haven't been the same since I read that Thomas Troward gave me tools to turn this mind into a monster, right? So there is one of my good friends I met back in, this must have been 2014 or 2015 now, I think, when we met, and I actually got to this book. He suggested a book to me, and it's a book called The Edinburgh and Door Lectures on Mental Science by Thomas Troward. Thomas Troward is a renowned New Thought leader, a metaphysicist. So, they like to study the relationship between the science of mind and thought and its application on matter, and among other things. And so brilliant man. And, there was a quote that stuck with me that he had, and let's see if I can pull it up from my subconscious storehouse and warehouse. But it went something along the lines of, my mind is a center of divine operation. The divine operation is always for expansion and fuller expression, and this means the production of something greater than and beyond what has gone before, something entirely new, not included in the past experience, though proceeding out of it by an orderly sequence of growth. Therefore, since the divine cannot change its inherent nature, it must operate in the same manner within me. Consequently, in my own special world, in and of which I am the center, my mind will move forward to produce, introduce, and attract new, more favorable conditions, always greater than and in advance of any that have gone before. And this is so. Wow. So much gratitude that I can pull that one back up. And so that always stuck with me, and that set my creative journey, my path on a whole different trajectory. And so then when I dive into this book, something caught my eye. There's a particular part in the book, chapter 13, In Touch with the Subconscious Mind. And, he's talking about, once again, how we can tap into the subconscious mind and, everything that's in there for us with it and just our relationship to it. So, he's saying, if then we would come to touch it, we must meet it on its own ground. It can see things only from the deductive standpoint and therefore cannot take note of the inductive standpoint from which we construct the idea of our external personality. So, and accordingly, if we would put ourselves in touch with it, we can do so by bringing it down to the level of the external and non-essential, but only by rising to its own level on the plane of the interior and essential. How can this be done? Let two well-known writers answer. Rudyard Kipling tells us in his story of quote-unquote Kim, that the boy used to at times lose his sense of personality by repeating to himself the question, quote-unquote, who is Kim? Gradually, his personality would seem to fade, and he would experience a feeling of passing into a grander and wider life, in which the boy Kim was unknown, while his own conscious individuality remained, only exalted and expanded to an inconceivable extent. So why this, right? Why this Kim? So this caught my eye. Let's see here. we can catch it on camera. Kim. In parentheses, it's a word in parentheses. It caught my eye because in 2012, many years before, a couple years before, I was walking to a grocery store. I remember vividly. I was in college, walking to a grocery store. I had my phone out. Usually typed notes on what I was getting from the store, a list. And I was trailing off. I'd pull out my phone, had notes open. I wasn't looking, and I trailed the words Kim on the screen. I was like, Kim, that's very strange. And it was like at 2:22, right? It was one of the angel sequences. And so I was like, man, I don't know what that is. But I saved it. I saved it for later. I didn't know because I thought it was important. And then when he suggested that, my brother suggested that, boom, that was like another little sign, a flash of synchronicity for me. And then I came to another book later on as well. This one by another New Thought leader and Science of Mind. He wrote a book, Science of Mind. He was also inspired by Thomas Troward, Ernest Holmes. This one's The Voice Celestial, in which it's a poem, a celestial poem about this character and the spiritual presences and witnesses within him. And he's going on this journey, talking to different spiritual leaders and people throughout history and antiquity. Very beautiful poem and story. And there's a part where it says, the pharaoh or the person is saying, long have I dwelt on this, how often in the watches of the night, when stillness spread like mist across the moor, have I in sacred silence brooded on reality until its meaning fell away from me and I seemed lost upon a sea of nothingness. So sea, right? Once again, we have these themes like seafarers, and it's very interesting. How then can you declare that incubation holds the key? I might with equal value ask myself this question: who am I, oh who am I? It's in the quotations. Until I lose consciousness of self and vaguely wonder who it is, who asks of whom. So, you got quotations there. There goes the bookmark. You already know. I need to save that. Sorry, I'll let it go for now. Find you. And so, on the back here, when I'm looking at that quotation, number 30, which I'm seeing 3, says, like Kipling's Kim. So, bam, another tie-in. So, these are all things for me. There are synchronicities, and it's like flashes, as ML Franz was saying, learning how to detect the flashes and the inspirations and the signs and connect things in number sequence to your life and figure out, are you on the path of your heart, the right path, the path of your unconscious mind. That's what we're doing here. So, yeah. Wow. And then, we're sharing it as well. So that's part of my artistic journey, part of my value, my quote unquote, as a Web3 artist, rather an artist in Web3. I'm an artist who uses Web3. There's like a talk of utility. I'm going to go on a tangent for a minute. There's a talk of like utility and like all this. Part of my quote unquote utility, or I think value that I provide as an artist and artists provide, is in sharing the inspirations, the content, the resources, things that shape them, because I'm inspired by these things that shape me, and others are inspired by things that shape them. So we can all catch a glimpse of inspiration and motivation and always stay inspired. So anyway, jumping back into that, right? So Kim, okay, that was another sign for me. So then, many years later, Beats by Ray, his brother, my brother, my other brother, they gave me this gift. Him and his girlfriend gave me this gift. Very beautiful friends of mine. And another tarot deck. I didn't get to mention it in the last one, but Wild Unknown Tarot. I love this one. It's a more modern one. Actually, this is the newest one in terms of how it's been made. And look at the author here. Kim Kranz. Wow. I didn't open this up. I had it for about a year. I didn't open it till this year as I was going through this album. And I love this deck because it has symbolism. Its symbolism is based more on nature and animals. So it helps you connect some of the cards and like the medieval imagery of the Marseille or the Rider-Waite or the Thought Tarot into like actual animals, right? So you may see, for instance, a duck, right? Duckling could be the fool, right? So instead of seeing like a court gesture in medieval garb, you might see a duck in nature, or you might see like a horse here, right, for the chariot, okay? You might see, strength, number 11, right? Lion with the 8 on his head, okay? So one of my favorites, the Hermit, 9, turtle, right? You might see this stuff. So I like this deck, but bam, Kim Kranz, right? So another little synchronicity tied in there. And it's just an album, once again, steeped in these synchronicities and these cool occurrences and things that, once again, just part of all of the lore, all the story and everything behind it. So, diving more then into that number 11, there's a couple more things, right? Going back to this book, Understanding Aleister Crowley's Tarot, by Lamula Duquette, where he's talking about, Frida Harris and Crowley, and, they're making this tarot deck. And so another interesting thing on 11, all right, there's an interesting part in here. What's up with 11? What's the deal with that? 11, all these 11s, 11 songs on my album. So here we have a part where he's talking about, it's page 43. He's talking about, how creation begins and some of the shapes and things of creation, symbols of creation. And once again, these number sequences, they correspond to shapes, and they correspond to, of course, tarot imagery, and numbers being esoteric themselves, of course. A lot of work done by, as far as we can trace it back, Babylonian and Egyptian, and of course Greek philosophers translated what they learned, of course. Pythagoras going, studying with the Egyptians, and it's like we have in track A Faye, like, arithmetic is getting real Euclidic, like Pythagoras when he had paid Egypt a visit, right? So we got those bars in there about that. So all this tying in, right? Cool shit, cool synchronicities. He says, creation begins and we move from potentiality to actuality when, like a loving stone, so once again, another tie into stone, our white cube unfolds as a golden cross of 6 squares. Once opened, it reveals a secret treasure, a rose of 5 petals, right? So we got, this unfolding here, the cube unfolding to the cross, and got a rose of 5 petals there. All right. From time immemorial, the number 5 has symbolized a microcosm, right? So number 5 on the album, we got Thomas Troward, right? Boom, talking about the mind. So there's another cool tie-in there. The little world of humanity, 5 fingers, 5 senses, head and extremities, etc. And the number 6 has symbolized the macrocosm, the greater world of deity. So number 6, right? Time back into Think and Grow Rich, the 6th sense, right? So there's another, once again, connecting threads, synchronicity. In the language of images, the rose of 5 crucified on the cross of 6 is a statement that tells us that as human beings, we are inextricably connected to the larger world, the larger reality of deity. As above, so below, the microcosm perfectly reflects the macrocosm. Adam was made in the image of God, and so forth. So Adam, so once again, another tie in here. I'm connecting this one now on track 9, South, as you mentioned earlier. You got a bar that says protozoa feeling parasitic on the Eve of Adam, just to get specific, right? So and that one is most layered. I was originally thinking like Parasite Eve. There's a PlayStation game, Parasite Eve. I want to tie it in. Of course, Adam and Eve, and then protozoa having single minds, and being parasites. So I want to tie all that in there. This is dope. This is a thread connecting this now. So you might ask, if we are such perfect images, if we are such perfect images of such perfection, why do things seem so imperfect? Why is there death and suffering? Why are there wars? Why are there fleas and black widow spiders? Why is there bad cholesterol? The answer is simple, but most of us are not yet equipped to accept it. We are already, right here, right now, the perfect reflection of a perfect deity. The problem is that we do not yet have a clue of who or what we really are. What we recognize as ourselves, the entity that laughs and weeps, that stubs its toes, falls in love, wins and loses, lives and dies, is not a true reflection of ourselves. We are something altogether different and more wonderful than anything we can imagine. Discovering the rose of our human 5-ness is wedded to the cross of deity's 6-ness is the first goal of every spiritual seeker. The next and last goal is for us to identify completely with our secret self and to come to the full realization that we are neither truly 5 nor 6, but a great big beautiful 11. This endeavor, for lack of a better name, is called the Great Work. So, it's called the Great Work. I had the project and that idea of mine, like Philosopher's Stone and perfection and making the great work. And, back then, 2011, when I was first making that project, and I didn't accomplish it. So once again, I felt many years later. Once again, in this book, I was talking about Crowley, his vision of the tarot and his version of it, and how the eon we're in now is like the eon of what he calls Horus. And Horus is the, ever crowned and radiant child who goes forward, resurrects himself, and dies not. His father is Osiris, who's the formula of the dying god. So we got stuff, and we got stuff falling off. That must have been we touched a vein there, right? So yeah, it's like ties perfectly in with this album. The formula of the child, the ever radiant child who dies not, goes forward, resurrects himself many times, as I mentioned, on this new artistic journey for me, going down this path and fully leading into my heart, everywhere where that's led into. Also, later Lady Frida Harris is talking about living fire and being able to paint these beauties with music and things, and of course my name, government name, Haru, right? And Haru was another name for Horus, the Egyptian god of force and fire, right? So there's all these synchronicities, all these tying in, everything from the birthday, the tarot symbolism, to the synchronicities and the ties to the various spiritual texts and religious texts throughout the ages, and then the pop culture tie-ins with the video games and the actual symbolism of like me being like Italian and going to Rome, and me being like black, what we call in this country African American, or Floyd Mayweather would say Black American, right, or whatever you want to call it. What my dad would say is Fahami, right? So all these things tying into this world and this vision, and growing up in a city, OKC, which is very off kilter, untraditional in terms of like, it's not a big city you would think of, especially for hip hop and rap and things like that. Just yeah, there's some people out here doing it. Shout out to my brother Young Barrett, put out OKC. Thunder, the basketball team, is just, there's so much symbolism and everything steeped into it that it's fun putting it together, and following the intuitions and things. Just let me know why the tracks had to come out the way they did, and everything like that. So we may be getting to the end on this one, fam. I feel like we've really dove into a lot of what I wanted to dive into on this one, which was the album art, the cover images, some more of my background, and how I like to look at images and interpret numbers in tarot and connect signs throughout multiple threads and things, and just to be able to continue on this awesome work of young Emma Von France, Troward Holmes, many others, and yeah, even in this book, like another thing's come to mind, talking in the Thinking of Tarot book, like he talks about how like the great seafarers will come back to the city of pyramids and things, and like there's that symbolism in this album as well. We're talking about the stones, right? This mountain, split mountain, right? A mountain is a stone. And so once again, everything coming together, and there's a quote that ties it all together beautifully for me. And we'll end with this. Once again, stream the album. Is out there literally everywhere now, traditional DSPs. So Spotify, Apple, iTunes, Amazon, Deezer. None of them are paying me yet, aside from the streaming. So go whichever your favorite one is. Also on upcoming Web3 platforms, Audius, SoundXYZ, Campfire. Go check all of those digital collectibles and stuff out. And we're going to be on more as more open up. Get on there. Let's rock this out. And we'll have more of these breakdowns coming. Next, we diving into the songs, and breaking down the bars and more synchronicities and ties and stuff like that. And yeah, fam, appreciate y'all rocking with me once again. Low vibe here at Web3 Studios. Soliloquies and OKC story part 2, baby. Next time we getting into home. And yeah, closing thought on this one. Once again, gratitude, grateful for everybody, wherever you're watching or listening this at. And I will say, about to quote one of my favorite philosophers and favorite quotes: the alchemists in their search for gold discovered many other things of greater value. Peace, fam.